What's up, everybody? So, I read this story about an hour ago on my phone, and it kind of hit home for me because when I used to live in California, I worked right across the street from the Blizzard headquarters at a bank I used to work at, and so I know a lot of the places that this guy's referencing. And for those who haven't been paying attention the last couple of years, you've kind of seen the end of the love story with developers, solid developers in the past like Bethesda and Blizzard. And it's starting to reach culminating things, and I just wanted to go over this story with you. Now, I'm going to warn people before I begin this. This is kind of some really psychologically kind of messed up stuff that this guy went through. And not to mention, this is also a long story, so if you don't got the heart for it, I understand. I am going to wrap up my thoughts at the end of the video, so... But anyways, what I'm going to do, and you see this is actually a very long story here. I am going to read the entire damn thing to you in this guy's psyche because it's an interesting take on what's going on in the game community, and then I'll wrap it up with my thoughts. I'm going to break in a little bit just to give some advice out there because I know how Southern California people are, and just people at tech companies in general, so... But whatever, let's begin. So, alright, so this is a guy named Jules MC. And the article is titled, Real Reason Why I Left Blizzard Entertainment, Racial Abuse and Discrimination. So here we go. I've written this retelling several times, too many that we've lost track. When I was reaching out to attorneys and later the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, during my employment at Blizzard Entertainment, the Blizzard esports team, supporting Hearthstone and the Hearthstone Championship Tour, I was the victim of racial abuse and discrimination during April through December 2016 until I was transferred to Blizzard's esports business operation team. I write this not only to finally get closure, but to tell my story as a minority who was abused and later failed by leadership. I joined the Hearthstone esports team as a temporary assignment February 2016. During this time, I would handle all day-to-day operations, tournaments, inbox points, events, etc. for the Hearthstone Championship Tour. My team was comprised of Trevor Houston, who, by the way, this guy has big balls to give the full names of people in this story. Drew Higby and Genma Beretta. Trevor would transition to Overwatch on a full-time basis, and this is when it all started going wrong as the team was left rudderless without a leader. I worked tirelessly on the esports program, growing the tour by 3 times, 400 plus weekly, cups, yada yada yada. He did a lot of stuff, so let's keep going. My time interacting with the Hearthstone community would be the highlight of my tenure. It wasn't uncommon for me to stay into the early hours of the morning, 2 to 3 a.m. to get points done since we were always late. We always ran tournaments to the last hour and it was very manual work. During the months of February through April, things went well, but working hours and making QA pay far lower than what I would later make, made it so that it took its toll. I kept powering through. Finally, I would get my chance to join the team as I applied to the Hearthstone esports team for the full-time position. After interviewing all the candidates, Drew and Trevor, happy with my work, I would stay full-time. Trevor was transitioning to the Overwatch team, and I felt a responsibility to stay by my friend and now manager. Drew Higby, instead of going with perhaps the greatest person I had the pleasure to work with, Trevor Houston. When I was hired full-time, that's when the mood in my team changed. We were no longer a unit, but 2 people, Drew and Gemma Beretta Mirkovic, and me. So there's a reason that he used her full name. We'll get to that here, so here we go. Meetings, calls, and important components of the tour would be a secret to me and only a task to execute when things were due or on fire, and I felt more like an outsider. At first, I thought it was normal since I was still new, but I've taken a lot of work. Hearthstone, business operations, and whatever little I could help Trevor with. I was still supporting him until he got his hires, made it so that I didn't notice much or care. It all changed when Genma would joke about my sexism and natural inclination to be sexist due to my heritage. Having been born Mexican and raised in Mexico, Gemma would experience Mexican culture as an exchange student. The assumption then became that I was just like everyone else and that my attitudes, beliefs were all of a Mexican machista, male chauvinist. I didn't make much of it since she said it in jest, quote unquote. But this would weigh on me, and I would later confide in my missus. Okay, stop. Number 1. If anyone jokes with you about being racist, sexist, or any of that shit, and they're not your friend, especially at work, that's not in jest. That is someone that's throwing the warning shots at you of, you know, essentially you're never going to be able to please that person, most likely. But they're also putting up, they're like kind of like what do you call that? Telegraphing their shot. They're like, okay, I got you in my crosshairs, I'm watching you, you better watch yourself. And it's their polite warning without actually giving you a warning. And this guy's married, so here we go. I came to Orange County, specifically Blizzard Entertainment, after my missus, Briesa Jimenez, sorry if I mispronounced that, accepted a role at Blizzard Entertainment. So his wife works at Blizzard, okay? I would thankfully join her in November 2013. Game Master Customer Support Team. I had uprooted my life in San Diego, California for her, and I would do it all again. San Diego's a nice place, dude. But alright, so here we go. I knew that Blizzard was her dream job, so she took the plunge and I followed. A machista putting his significant other's career in front of his life. The jokes regarding my machismo and me being Mexican would only become more frequent, and finally culminate in the events that started my descent into literal madness. I was diagnosed with major depression and would later develop anxiety, getting weekly anxiety attacks, then panic attacks, nervous breakdowns, one of which I almost took my life, and finally suicidal thoughts. I had measured the amount of rope I would need, the knot, and the place where I was going to do it in Christmas. Alright. Stop. This is where things get dramatically worse, so once again, I warn you guys, I don't want to take the psychological stuff, you know. But, number 1, if your job makes you feel any of those things that he listed, especially suicide, that's when you stop the fucking job. It does not matter what you are going through. Okay, you need to fucking stop, because your health is more important than any other bullshit you could do, and it's not your dream job if you're starting to feel that way. But let's continue. The bullpen was Genma Beretta, Drew Higby, and me. During the months May through July 2016, the frequency and vitriol and the jokes about my machismo would intensify. Bringing these concerns to my friend and manager Drew, and then later my personal manager, Jeremy McIntyre at the time. The structure was set up so that my HR life concerns would be handled by Jeremy, while Drew managed me on the product side. When I approached Drew, I was told that I was being moody, and that nobody knew how to approach me in the bullpen. When I told him what was happening, I was told not to pay attention and that he would take care of it. That wouldn't be the case, and the racial attacks continued. Okay, another time out here. If you go to your manager and your manager assigns a negative adjective to you, such as moody in this case, immediately stop all communications with the manager, go straight to HR. Because you tried with the manager, your manager didn't listen to you. So you need to go to something higher, because that is not acceptable as a manager anywhere that you are working. There's just some advice for you guys that are just starting your workforce, or maybe you don't know. Alright, so let's go here. During a heated debate over the etymology of male-derived words that Genma and Drew were having in the middle of the workday, I decided to weigh in. Mistake. Never fucking do anything like that at work. If anybody's talking about anything racial, sexual, whatever, ghost, you don't exist. Go do something else. If you can, take a break, do something, get the fuck out of there. Since I was in the midst of completing my BA in English writing from UC Denver's online program, what would happen next would be a scene out of The Twilight Zone, as Gamma would then single me out and direct her ire towards me. I only posited the question, I assume he means pose the question, into what would you change terms like corpseman, yowman, and other military or official terms. This was a terrible mistake, as I was then called out for being sexist because I was Mexican. Mind you, Genma and I had a great relationship at the start, since we spoke Spanish to each other. But she would then use Spanish to remind me of being Mexican and therefore sexist. My embarrassment, however, would not end there. Kim Fan, director of esports, would walk into the bullpen. We had an emergency exit most people use to access the building, which is also weird, but whatever. And Genma would immediately stop Kim and reel her into the conversation. Now keep in mind, guys, this is the director of esports, okay? Genma and Joy raved that Kim was there, and she would see things her way. When she went on to discuss what the conversation was and how these guys pointing at me with her gesture were taking a sexist stance and that the girls should stick together. Genma went on to tell her the conversation, omitting that it was actually Drew and her. But I was simply trying not to take a side and move on, since the conversation was not about workplace appropriate. Instead, she used that time to platform to launch her tirade against me, singling me out and then insinuating that I was sexist. This would destroy me inside because I was the furthest from the truth. I assume it means this is furthest from the truth. And she was telling this to our director. I was livid. I reached out to Drew and asked him for a meeting. We drove to a Wendy's drive-thru so that he could eat and we could talk peacefully. I told him about why I joined Blizzard, why Genma was attacking me, and why I had become the team's punching bag for any general grievance in the team. By this time, I was being ignored of all meetings. Yeah, you know, there's some mistakes here, guys. It's just the way it is. He's probably emotional as he's writing this up. Changes to the tour and anything of relevance to my daily job of running operations for the HCT. Not like I need to know or be in the conversation of any changes to the program. I approve hundreds of events to the players or organizations, or organizers I was in daily contact, or the thousands of points I would have to oversee to ensure the players were able to fulfill their esports dreams. No, I was simply a person that sat in a computer in front of Excel and Outlook for hours, and somehow events and players appeared. Drew assured me that he would talk with her, that she was going through life things, and that things would get better once we got more headcount and my workload was reduced. I was still working stupid hours to get things done regularly, and my health under the pressure of having to deal with Genma started to nosedive. This is where things get pretty bad, guys, so here we go. My doctor visits were intensified, and my doctor noting sharp declines in my health with this latest attack in front of Kim would lead me to my first ever panic attack. I've had a panic attack. Panic attacks fucking suck. After dinner with my missus, I passed out the minute we got home, like a bad episode of Tony Soprano. I woke up not knowing what had happened or where I was. I would go to the doctor and he would explain to me that this is anxiety and that I was now going through panic attacks. I guess I was lucky that it happened at home and not somewhere else. My doctor would then go on to prescribe me lorazepam and something stronger, can't recall the name. That's very bad, by the way, if you can't recall the name to your medication. But to take as needed. I doubt the doctor said that, but okay. In the event of an anxiety or panic attack. Oh, okay, he probably did say that. I ended up taking the as needed daily because of the stress and pressure of being in that environment. I guarantee that's not what the doctor meant. Because of the environment, I would develop PTSD by August, and now concerns were being raised by me almost weekly. Nothing was done. During August 2016, we would be invited to Amy and Mike Morheim's house as part of the thank you dinner with the Hearthstone esports team and executives of Team 5 Hearthstone. And I would be unable to attend because I was out 2 days after yet another panic attack and subsequent doctor's visit. I had a doctor's note written and a higher dosage provided so that I could cope with my stress, but my doctor was alarmed that my health had deteriorated so fast. The relationship was frosty across the Hearthstone team, and when our latest member of the Hearthstone team, Brian Carl, joined us, I knew that I was personally being ostracized and attacked. I was left out of key meetings to the program. I was working on daily and not given important tasks to the program I was working on till the last minute. My long work hours continued, working BlizzCon hours, 80 to 100 hour work weeks. That is fucking insane. Once you get to, for those who don't know in California, once you get to 50 hours, you start making double pay, basically. The 50 hours? Yeah, I believe it's 50 hours. Although Calimod changed their laws since then. So this guy was probably making stupid money, but it's not worth it for your health. Anyways, let's keep going. On a non-BlizzCon week, at least once a month, by the time I was getting anxiety attacks at work, and under 3 different meds, I had never had more than 1 prescription, and it was mostly for 1 to 3 times at a max. Man, oh man. Finally, in October 2016, I decided to leave the team and started applying across the entire company to leave. The Blizzard esports team wouldn't get an HR manager until October 2016, and during the 5 to 6 months prior, we navigated with non-existent HR personnel. They introduced themselves once, but I didn't know where to find them or reach them at the campus. Yeah, I'm sure they had pretty busy jobs. The Hearthstone Championship Tour would go on to have its greatest season ever, and during opening week 2016, the prelude to BlizzCon 2016, I was approached by Kim Fan during our broadcast of the HCT at our studio in Torrance. Oh wow, he went all the way to Torrance, huh? Kim had received a notification that I was looking to leave the esports team, and I was told that leadership was coming since neither Drew nor Gamma was apt or capable of leading the team. She would recommend I wait to meet Chi Chu, Hearthstone esports lead, they had recently hired before I left. I met Chi during BlizzCon for the first time and would have lunch with him before Thanksgiving break. I explained to him the team dynamic, omitting my situation because I didn't know him, and what I wanted to see. He didn't listen to a single word I said, yep. I've had a similar experience. Chi had made up his mind about how the team would be operating, and any feedback I had was falling on deaf ears. Afterwards, I would not say much but nod. And from that point on, any professional relationship with Chi I could have had went out the window. Instead, I would intensify my job search. After this conversation, Genma then rescheduled a meeting with me so that we could go over my new role and how she would be managing my workload. I received the meeting invite, and what happened to the meeting would send me on a spiral. Yeah boy, here we go. Genma booked the meeting in room next to Kim Fan's office. The walls were paper thin, and when I took the furthest seat from her, she revealed to me that going forward, she would be responsible for handling my work, not Drew, and that all tasks needed to be done a certain way, and I had to provide her with detailed breakdowns of what I was doing. This was news to me, and I simply said, "This is news to me," realizing that I had said what I thought. She pounced and started to scream at me. "I don't know what your problem is with me!" The screaming Gemma would start as she launched into her tirade at me, calling into question me and how I was questioning her and her authority because she was a woman. I was stunned because I was just finding out news that I had dreaded to find out, and that she would be responsible for my job while she despised me. Pause. Alright, number one. If I've had this type of thing happen to me, where like a guy became a supervisor that I hated and, you know, he started to go through it, but it wasn't nearly as bad as this situation. So number one, when you get that supervisor or manager or whatever the fuck their role is, and they start talking about their authority and you have to do things their way and don't you dare question anything, okay. That's something to where you really need to start considering. Because I know this guy, he's looking for a job within Blizzard. I would get the fuck out of Blizzard at this point. I would have gotten the fuck out of Blizzard at the first point of the panic attack, personally. But, you know, this guy wants to keep this job. He's not me, so let's keep going. Let's see here. I went into my chair and clammed up, fearing things would escalate, that I would be fired since she was one of Kim's best friends, and that Kim was listening to this next door. I felt little. I felt worthless. I simply stated, "I'm just finding this out," and I just said what came to my mind, realizing that I was clearly stunned, aghast, and fearing for my job. She reeled it back in. She tried to compose herself, but the damage was done, and I didn't know what to do. After the meeting, I asked another manager in the esports team, to join me for a smoke. So he smokes on top of all this, man. I would tell him what happened, and he advised me to reach out to Paul Gimmel, HR manager, and the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse. I needed to find some sense of direction after now 7 months of writing Storm. I'm always suspicious, the reason I'm laughing, guys, I'm always suspicious of companies that come up with like really kind of crazy names for normal shit, like teams and meetings and what I assume is HR, the Lighthouse, you know, whatever. But here we go. Alright. I confided in Paul everything that happened that day, and foolishly, not telling him about my brushes with her discrimination, which was also a mistake there, I was ashamed, and I was just a shell of a man that walked into those doors. I thought about suicide every day. I felt lonelier than ever. I didn't want to say what had happened. Maybe because I feared for my job. I feared that Genma, being friends with Kim, would still get me fired. I feared that I had maybe imagined this, but my missus would reaffirm to me much later that I was in fact constantly discriminated against. That same day I would go home, having another panic attack and missing 2 more days at work. For anyone not having had a panic attack, it feels like having a heart attack at first, yep. Then a surge of emotion, yep. Vitriol, sadness, impotence, anger, yep. And in my case, an outpouring of crying, anger, and my heart feeling like it was bursting repeatedly. Yeah, I didn't really get that. I got the anger. But anyways. Like someone driving an ice pick into your chest plate. It was uncontrollable feelings of despair. I thought, having reached out to Paul, things would change, but Genma wasn't done bullying and harassing me. She would do it again in December 2016. I would report the issue in meetings ensued to try and iron these issues out. At this point, I was getting anxiety attacks at work almost daily. I had a panic attack at work in Paul's office during a one-on-one, and I ran out of the building in tears, covering my face in shame as I left esports behind and headed to the trail. By the way, I've been to that trail. That trail's pretty common in that area. All the local offices walk it, so... Blizzard has a walking trail people would use, and I broke down just outside my office. I came in several minutes later, 30 to 40, and apologized to Paul, asked him if I could leave, and continued to sob. Some members of the team would see me, adding to my shame. Paul would suggest I seek the guidance of a counselor at Blizzard, and I followed suit. Okay. Just, whoop, whoop, whoop. No. Never. Ever. Fucking go to a counselor that works for the company you work at. You might as well just fucking shove a rod up your ass. That's one of the stupidest things. And I'm not trying to belittle this guy because he didn't know. And I did it once too, and at the time I didn't know. The reason you never fucking go see a counselor that works for the company you're working at, because they're not counselors, guys. They're not there to help solve your problems. They are there to cover the company's ass and put things you say in a file that can later be used against you when they're either going to fire you or discipline you or yada yada yada, whatever has you, demote you, write you up, etc. Never, never, anyone in the job, if you get nothing else from this video, never go to company counseling, okay? Go find your own counselor. And I realize, you know, it's $50, $40 if you're lucky to get a counselor for one session, but you will get tons more done with a regular counselor than you ever will with a company counselor. They are not there to help you. They are there to cover the company's ass. Period. End of story. Everything that you say will be reported directly to HR, directly to all of management involved. And the odds are pretty good if you have some enemies on the team and they're friends with the manager's gonna tell them. So just never fucking do that. That is a gigantic mistake. Alright, here we go. So, I reached out believing I was the problem, and after 3 visits, I started seeking counseling. I still believed I was the problem, and I would be in therapy for the next year. When I visited my doctor, it was decided that I would be placed on medical leave or absence. My health was deteriorating at a startling rate. Medically documented, as I posed a suicide risk, and my missus had already instructions for me to commit me if my condition worsened, or I grew mad to the point that I could not be cared for by her. When I told this to Chi during a walk, he would tell me that they would have to find a replacement for me. Not what you want to hear, but it is illegal if it is within 90 days to find a replacement. My job needed to be there when I returned after my medical leave. This would prompt another anxiety attack, clarification, and an apology because this leave was work-related. I went on to medical leave of absence, not uncommon at Blizzard. Ain't that the damn truth? From February to May 2017. Upon my return, I was transferred to Blizzard, esports, business operations, and at first it felt like I would be able to make a recovery. I would be mistaken, as Kim's demeanor towards me went from "you're indispensable" and look after Gizmo, her puppy, and my companion during most days while I was alone at my bullpen, to borderline hostile. During a Hearthstone meeting boasting about 2016 successes, which I was instrumental, quote-unquote, I was wholly omitted from the team's accomplishments. And I'll never forget her face, the death stare, and my omission of what hurt my Hearthstone accomplishments, even though I was the ops guy. Instead, the credit went to everyone and the praise went to others, including promotions to Drew and Genma. I wouldn't get my end-of-the-year review until August 2017, after chasing my review for months and playing a cat-and-mouse game with my former manager, Jeremy. I would receive my lowest performance grade ever in the 5 years at Blizzard. I was always a highly reviewed employee at the time. I was not. I was labeled difficult to work with and not a team player, despite doing things outside of my JD job description. Too many to count. And I would stay into the early hours of the morning and come back the next day at 10:30 and receive cracks from Genma for coming in late. In my review, a lot of my work achievements and overall quality of life improvements in my department would be omitted, and my now manager, Cara LaForge, would see how livid I was. Esports would never be the same, and my job search continued internally and externally. I knew that if I stayed at Blizzard Esports, I wouldn't be promoted, despite my quality of work, and that I had to move on. My health would never recover during my time at Blizzard. Business operations were constantly underwater. The pressure was too much, and I always felt like I had a target on my back. My doctor visits would occur once a month. My psychologist would see me weekly and my psychiatric monthly as needed. I had 4 different prescriptions, and I would later develop gastrointestinal issues that led me to the ER. I had developed several stomach issues in my time at Blizzard Esports, and after the ER visit in 2017, I felt dejected and lost because of how my body was failing me. Alright, stop. So once again, this is nothing against this guy, because he's clearly distressed and going through a lot of stuff at a younger age than me. But there is a tendency I have noticed among my younger colleagues in life to accept medicine, and in this case prescriptions, as kind of like a normal thing. And you know, to some people, if they have certain attributes or disabilities or whatever, what have you, conditions, okay, fine, 1 prescription, 2 prescriptions. But when you get to the point where you have 3 and 4 prescriptions and you're in your 20s, and as far as I know, this guy hasn't said, you know, I suffer from XYZ condition, whatever. Yes, he just started at this job to get the stuff, but when you get to the point where you have 4 prescriptions, dude, you're in your 20s. Like, what the fuck's going on? You need to, like, get that shit ironed out, and because of what's gonna happen when you're in your 30s, you're gonna be on 5 and 6 things, 40, 7 and 8 things, and imagine when you get to 60, my god, dude. Anyways, alright, so I felt dejected and lost because now my body was failing me. My mental health began regressing, and before I knew it, I had a full relapse. I was ordering lunch and a chain of emails would spark a nervous breakdown while I was driving. Ugh, I would never forget that day. I was at the S-Switch Bistro, I've been there. I placed my order and I was already growing increasingly frustrated with the things happening in our department. I recall seeing emails, and one in particular, "Jules, you messed up," from my manager. I lost it. I had made sure everything was done meticulously, but I had fucked up. I lost it. I got in my car and I started driving. I realized I was having a panic attack and I headed for home. I lived 3 to 4 miles from the campus. And I didn't care if I was going to be fired because I had so much medical history that it would almost be a blessing. I started laughing while I wept, cackling, and then lost it. I was driving down Sand Canyon, then gave it the beans, barreling 80 to 90 miles per hour. On my way towards the Woodbury area, there were always dump trucks headed towards the mountains, and I maneuvered my car so that it could hit the 18-wheeler head-on. Seat unbuckled, and suddenly I got out. The gap that I was going to use to ram myself head-on in the gap was the gap to enter the 5 North freeway. I'll never forget. And I got back on my side of Sand Canyon. Oh my god. So for those who don't know some background, the area around the Blizzard campus, it's very curvy, lots of hill, a little bit of hills, not a ton of hills. And so to drive like that, 80, 90 miles per hour in that area, that's pretty crazy. But anyhow, obviously this guy's having some issues here. I texted my missus, or excuse me, Somehow he made it home. He texted the missus, and she would pick me up from the car. I was pale, white like a paper, and I'm brown, and I was in tears. She walked me upstairs like an invalid, like a 90-year-old person, and I wept. I remember I wept for almost 2 hours. Suddenly, my missus didn't know what to do but just try and console me. I would be out a week. I had already given new instructions to institutionalize me, and had this conveyed to my doctors. Oh boy. After that instant, I would be monitored more, making sure that I didn't endanger myself or try to, and it would culminate into a new nervous breakdown at work. October 2017, I would get a nervous breakdown at work. Maybe the stress of work and preparation for BlizzCon, or the stress that I was a skip and a hop away from losing my job led me to that point. I blacked out. I had gotten a panic attack, and I went to the trail to walk and get clean air. Excuse me. I texted my missus, and she came to find me, finding me on the side of the trail in tears, and trying to overcome this panic attack. Hoping it didn't become another nervous breakdown. Paul and Kara insisted I come inside to their office and talk to them, but on my way there, I would black out. My missus said I was screaming, "I don't want to go! I don't want to go! Please don't take me in there! I don't want to go!" Screaming like I was begging for my life. And Bree told me she screamed at Paul, "Get the fuck inside! Can't you see you're triggering him?" I think Bree's his wife. I kept screaming and trying not to walk closer towards their office. This happened with people in the office, but thankfully BlizzCon preparations had half the office out the campus. I finally came to when I was outside, and both my missus and Kara kept trying to comfort me while I sobbed. I would go back inside to work that same day because we needed to get things done in preparation for BlizzCon. This would be my last one. During November, I would have another nervous breakdown at work. This time, they sent me home and activated a leave on my behalf. I was clearly becoming a liability, and they would look for a new team outside of esports since it wouldn't get better. During December 2017, I reached out to the EEOC, hoping to get a resolution should Blizzard fail, and that's when I realized the statute of limitation regarding my racial discrimination and abuse. I didn't have much to go by, and my case would be dismissed. It was this December. I figured it was time to end my life. My missus had plans to visit her ailing grandma in Mexicali, and I would be left alone during the holidays. I'm going to kill myself December 24th, 2017. I had measured the rope. I needed several loops around the pillar on the outside of the floor of the third apartment to account for weight, and the pillar I would use to support my frame. I think my missus sensed when she was leaving that this would be goodbye. She wouldn't come to see a dead body. Since I would be in plain view of my apartments because I couldn't do that to her. I couldn't have her find my body, so I was going to do it alone with my girls. Ildonis and Illy, my cats. Not daughters, guys, cats. And say farewell. Bree stayed, and I stayed because she was there for me. I would not return from this leave of absence, and on February 2018, I handed my resignation after being placed on a new unpaid leave of absences while they found me a home. Nothing was done during my initial leave, and I was left to the wind. I write this today because the Soldier 76 announcement and subsequent tweets triggered me. For those who don't know, and I'm going to talk about it a little later, Soldier 76 announcement. Blizzard basically came out and gave Soldier 76, which is a guy character, a little side comic, like I think it's like one page, basically saying that he is homosexual gay. So that was the thing that triggered him. But who it was coming from, Blizzard. The idea of inclusion, a representation, and every voice matters and think globally never meant that to me and for other people of color I've spoken to, because up until recently in the last 2 years, has the community had some representation and initiatives. But are we really represented? My missus dealt with her own discrimination, that's her story, and other current and former alumni have confessed similar or worse treatment and nothing being done. This is my closure. Most people didn't know why I departed Blizzard Entertainment, but I couldn't stand idly while others didn't have the slightest clue as to why my vitriol towards a company I truly loved, and that I poured everything into only to be shown the back door. I had filed a federal complaint, this is public knowledge, and nobody can tell me I cannot share what happened to me personally. Few people know what it's like to believe that the only way out is suicide, and that No matter what, it's the only option. I'll never forget Jill's face when she saw in my eyes that I wanted to die. I confessed to her and Paul that I was thinking about doing it. But I'll never forget Paul asking me alone if I had plans of harming myself, and I told him I couldn't do that to Bree. But I knew that she was the only one keeping me on this plane. Nobody will ever understand the anger I feel towards Blizzard Entertainment because they drove me to almost take my life countless times. I'll never forgive Nani, Idana's faces when I was saying goodbye to her and was going to my tub to slice my wrists. I couldn't do that when I saw her face. As if she knew, and Bree would instead find me unconscious after taking several pills. Nobody will ever understand, but at least whoever reads this will know this is my closure. Sincerely, Julian Murillo Guelar, sorry. Alright, so that's a lot to take in. Hopefully, Julian is getting the help he needs now, and I hope that whatever he's doing with his life now, including what I hope is more counseling, hopefully getting off of all those freaking prescriptions, and just some healing. He needs a lot of healing. And it sounds like his wife's a good wife, and, you know, he's got his cats and whatever. That's all great, and hopefully he's feeling better. This was a person... I'll speak on Julian real quick, then I'll get to Blizzard. This is a person that, for those who don't know, guys, when you're in your 20s, your brain is still developing to the point of you're still figuring out who you are as a person. And most people, the average is about age 27. And I forget when exactly how old this guy said he was at the beginning. I'll go look real quick. I forget. It's somewhere in there. Well, anyway, so while that's happening, a lot of psychological changes are going on with you. And, you know, that was a part and parcel of... He was taking things very hard, and I don't blame him. He was, you know, he did get racistly targeted, and a lot of corporate bullshit, and, you know, that thing of, don't worry, we'll take care of it. Never fucking believe that, because you're the only person at the end of the day that has your interests at heart and knows what you're going through, so... You always got to take a personal ownership and stuff like that. But unfortunately for Julian, you know, he made some mistakes. And we've all made similar mistakes. And hopefully, like I said, he's getting the counseling and stuff that he needs to live a productive life and a good life. And hopefully find a better job that's going to treat him right from now on. Because that's some bullshit. And so you get kind of an internal... perspective there as to what the culture of Blizzard is and how corporate handles things and the workload and the stress and etc, etc. So for those who don't know, I guess I could get to the let me go into Blizzard's culture first. So there was a point in the story where Julian said that leave of absences were not uncommon. The tech industry is very notorious in Southern California and Northern California for abusing its employees' hours. And now, granted, you have deadlines to hit, you know, fans want things, etc., etc. But, you know, to the point where you're working 80 and 100 hours, I'm trying to think, have I ever worked that much? I think I pulled 60-some hours one week. And that was like... I was driving myself insane, but it was all voluntary, because I could have left if I wanted to. But I decided I wanted to make that money, and it was all voluntary, and I worked every hour I could, with the exception of 4 hours that week, working at a tax job. But anyhow, I was going insane there, and my body was just like, dude, what the fuck? Let's go home. So I can imagine what this poor guy was going through, especially having to deal with Hearthstone and stuff. So I have a friend... And my friend ever since high school, I want to work at Blizzard, I want to work at Blizzard. Oh man, it'd be so great if I worked at Blizzard. He's a talented guy, he's an artist, you know, really cool dude, has lots of talents, etc. And so he's constantly submitted his art and, you know, interviewed, whatever I think it's like every 6 months you can resubmit your application. Gotten to know people at Blizzard, etc., etc. And... you know, this was back in the day when Blizzard was producing StarCraft and Warcraft 3, and then eventually WoW, and etc. and etc. And probably right up until Overwatch came out. Blizzard, you know, overall was a great company, but I've told him since then, and that was like about, what, like 2015, 2014, Overwatch came out. I told him, I'm like, dude, you don't want to live at you don't want to work at Blizzard. He's like, yeah, I do. Well, why do you say that? I'm like, trust me, you don't want to work at Blizzard. And the reason you don't want to work at Blizzard, I mean, clearly there was a lot of things highlighted here, but I told him, I'm like, look, at Blizzard, all the people that made Blizzard, they're all gone now. And they're all doing their own successful ventures, like the Mike guy that made Diablo 2, he's making his own game. The guy that makes Critical Role, that's on Twitch, really good. And then just a bunch of the guys that did a bunch of stuff for Blizzard in the past, just pure gods in the industry, they're all gone doing their own things now, their own gaming studios, whatever. And so I told him, I'm like, those guys are all gone, dude, and now they've been replaced with Activision, which means corporate. Corporate, and I say this all the time, corporate will eventually kill everything that it is a part of. And as we've seen in the case of Blizzard, that is no exception. And I hate to tell you guys that are still holding on hope, that is not Blizzard anymore. Blizzard is long since dead. There is a company with Blizzard's pelt on called Activision. That is the company that is making the shit now, and that is why you're seeing all the drastic fuck-ups over the last... I mean, really, it's taken place ever since BlizzCon, but even before that, there have been plenty of fuck-ups that kind of went under the radar. But, so, hopefully, I'm actually going to send this story to my friend, and hopefully he's going to get a, you know, a perspective that I'm kind of trying to show him about why you do not want to work for this company, and why you really want to do your own thing in life now. But, so I promised I was going to get to the Soldier 76 story. So like I said earlier, Soldier 76, in fact, let me see if I can pull it up. Soldier 76, gay. I just want to see the fucking, hopefully I don't get like porn or something, in fact, you know what. Too late. Let's see here. Overwatch short story confirms Soldier 76 is gay. So let's go here. I just want the comic. I don't want, like, yeah, here it is. La la la. Okay, I'll turn off ad block even though I won't. For fuck's sake. Okay, fine, whatever. Well, anyways. So, Soldier 76, they revealed him as gay, and they gave him like a little itsy-bitsy side story, but it was just like one of those things where they just throw a bone to the LGBT. Apparently there's a Q now, Q community. And, see, the thing with me is, because I'm a story writer, I don't care what your character is. They could be gay, they could be straight, they could be a robot, they could be an alien, they could be normal white, you know, vanilla person, they could be whatever, racial, whatever, sexual, whatever, I don't give a fuck. As long as it is a good character, I do not give a fuck what it is, okay? But, in this case, if they're going to come out with a storyline like this, and it was the same thing with Tracer, give them a proper fucking backstory, like actually invest into it, don't just throw some token bullshit down. Be like, hey guys, this person's gay. Okay, let's see his past, let's see, you know, him, give us an inspirational story of him struggling to, you know, figure out who he is as a person, and coming to terms with it, and maybe coming to terms with people that treat him differently because of that, etc, etc. Everyone in life goes through that shit in a different way. And that's just another way that it can happen in real life. And that would be so much more beneficial, but instead it's just, okay guys, he's gay. We did it. Alright, let's get back to making fucking money. Like, that's all this comes off as. It's not like a fucking, you know, like some revelation or something like that. So that's just Blizzard throwing up one of the shields, trying to deflect all their negative PR that they've been getting recently, and it's just silly, so I just wanted to comment on that story, guys, because it bothered me a lot. It bothered me that Julian had to go through all that shit. I've been through similar stuff, just not nearly as bad as the stuff he went through. And, you know, the gaming community now, it's getting to the point where actually working in the gaming community for a corporate base, you know, you might as well go to fucking Iraq. Like, it's getting to that point. I mean, no disrespect to anybody as far as the soldiers and everything go, but you know what I'm saying? Like, the way that your psyche is and some of the shit that you're putting up with, it's not that far away, and you're home supposedly doing your dream job. So it's a big difference from, you know, serving honorably and going, you know, on tours and stuff like that. So, but anyways, I wanted to get this, guys. I'm gonna quit the video soon. I don't want to make it too long, but I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this. For those of you who actually made it to the end, I'm assuming most of you are gonna listen to this, you know, as like background noise in your workday or whatever. Let me know what you think about this, and you know what's going on, what Julian had to go through, Blizzard in general, and yeah. See, okay. One more point before. One of my best friends in the world is bisexual, and I had guessed it. I'd actually guessed he was gay, but he turned out to be bisexual. But I had guessed it about like 4 or 5 months before he told me. And I remember we were going on one of our walks because we lived together at the time. And we used to walk up hills and walk a couple miles, walk back and talk and have some fun. Well, we're walking along the lake, which is about a mile from the house, and it's like evening time, sunset, and he's walking with me, and he's like, I got something I need to tell you. And he was like it was like, I don't know, what would you say? It was like, you know, you were about to tell Hitler that you were a Jew. Like, that's the way he was acting. Like, he was really shaking and really, you know, just like contemplative and kind of almost like remorseful, even though he hadn't said anything yet. And you know, it's kind of like there's a shame that society put on you at that time, because this was back in like 2008. And so he's like, I'm bi. And so I told him, I'm like, I know. And he looked at me like, really? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, how did you know? And it was just some of the things he would like comment on, and some of the videos he was talking about, and etc. And I was like, yeah, I guessed it, dude. He's like, and at the time, I was actually more of a Christian guy. I'm not so much nowadays, but I was back then. I was more of a religious person. So he was afraid that I would tell him that, and I would be one of those religious people that would be like, homosexuality is a sin! Repent! You know, like all that shit. And of course I'm not going to be like that, because this is the guy that, you know, when my car would break down, this is one of the guys that would come give me rides. This is the guy that would give me rides to work. This is the guy that would, you know, put me up when I didn't have a place to stay, etc., etc. So why the fuck would I turn on him just because he's homosexual / bisexual? So, and it was funny because at that point he had been dating girls most of the time, but at that point he went on a spree of like 10 guys he dated. It was like, are you sure you're bi, bro? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. But anyways, so see, stuff like that pisses me off, because I'll never know, because obviously I'm not. But I saw that pain and that kind of uncertainty. And you can imagine trying to tell all your family members and your friends that this is the way I am. And that's that. And of course, some of them, okay, cool. Some of them, fuck you. Some of them, okay, man. And then they never talk to you again. So I personally think it's an insult just to put out, oh yeah, this guy's gay. Like, no, people know next to nothing about this guy. But they've still played up a lot of the other hero side stories, and whatever. Anyways, that's it for me, so. Yeah. Get woke. I'll catch you guys later.